The following is an encore presentation of stories from the Dooralong Transformation Centre.
And you're listening to 94.9 Rima Central Coast. It's 10.5 past 10. We're going to say good morning again to Gab from the Dooralong Transformation Centre. Good morning again, Gav.
Good morning, Phil.
Okay, now if you're listening for the 10 o'clock news, you would know that Gav has been at the Dooralong Transformation Centre now for some 8.5 months, which is quite a long time. But we want to turn our clocks back even beyond that, even further than that, to when the addiction became an issue for Gav. And Gav was telling me off air that it's drugs that's your addiction, isn't it, Gav?
Yeah, drugs is my addiction, but like in saying that, it's it did start with alcohol, and alcohol's played a part throughout my drug use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when did it start, or when did it start to become a problem?
Look, I think the easy way to say that is the moment I picked up.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my first drink when I was a teenager at high school. My first drink was pretty ugly, and it was there was nothing sort of normal about that. It was sculling a few beers and vomiting all over where I was at, which half of it vomiting all over myself, and passing out.
But that didn't put you off?
No, I remember one of my goals from that night was like I need to learn how to drink properly.
Not I need to drink less. It was I need to learn how to drink properly.
Yeah.
And what age were you at this time?
Oh, like, I don't know, 15, 14, 15.
Yeah. And you were telling me earlier that you were very much part of the surfy culture as well. So your story, I think, will resonate with a lot of our listeners because, Central Coast's a big surfing area. But you grew up in that culture, didn't you?
Yeah, down Cronulla way, and it was. We used to sort of wag school and go down the beach, and there was, I guess there was sort of two types of people in that culture. There were the Christian surfers, and then there was the surfers that were, using drugs and partying, and I didn't steer towards the Christian surfers.
No, I think we worked that one out for ourselves, Gav. you found the other guys. Yeah. And that is a huge part of the culture, isn't it? Alcohol and drugs. Yeah. And that's what you're growing up with in your mid-teens. You're waking off school, you're just going down to the beach, and you're into alcohol and drugs.
So late 80s it was alcohol and pot. And that sort of come into the early 90s, which was sort of like a bit of a dance party scene that was sort of starting to hit Sydney back then, and a lot of ecstasy and a lot of trips, and also that stuff was really sort of paramount around the people I hung around. And
But at the age of 15, and just a couple of more years into your sort of 17, 18, you'd be looking for a job. Was that made more difficult because of your sort of reliance on drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, 100%. Like I couldn't hold down a job. I never had any problem getting a job or getting a start in a job. By the time I was 17, I'd started like 5 different apprenticeships, and there was a lot of sort of work around the area, and I could never start a job for more than 2 weeks. I'd get my first pay packet, and to just go on drugs and alcohol.
Was that not an alarm bell for you, that you started 5 apprenticeships in just such a short period of time? Did that not ring an alarm bell for you to say, hang on, this isn't normal?
No, my alarm bell has never really worked that well. I think it rang an alarm bell for my parents.
Yeah, they were worried for you.
My mum, that they used to mention that. I just.
But your attitude was, I've got this covered. I'm okay.
Yeah, exactly right.
We've spoken to a number of guys from Dooralong who had the attitude that they could have stopped if they wanted. Was that also your?
100%.
Yeah.
I've been saying that until just recently, actually.
Yeah.
Now I'm 48 years young, so.
Yeah. So it's a lie you tell yourself.
Yeah, I think that's the lie is denial. I'm in denial. I don't You know, it's not like I wake up of a morning and say I'm going to tell myself these lies so I can go and do A, B, and C. It's you know, I'm too far down the rabbit hole, even if addiction hasn't set in. You know, it's like back then when I'm young, it's all about you know, like the term peer pressure. It's like I just wanted to fit in.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to feel part of.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like I didn't have any problems fitting in at school, but you know, from a physical sense, I fitted in and I had mates. But you know, in my head, I wanted to be part of. I come from a family that sort of broke up, and you know, mum and dad got divorced, and you know, and there was just, you know, I wasn't happy at home, and then I'd come to school and acting like nothing was going on at home, but stuff was, and you know, so you know, they're my sort of earliest memories or my earliest fears of, you know, I never wanted my family to break up, and you know, I wished my mum and dad weren't going to break up or they wouldn't be fighting, and so I just sort of come from a background of you know, I want things to be okay, and you know, I was just sort of, I want to fit in. I want to fit into my family. I want to fit into school. I want to fit into a friend circle. Just all of those friends were using.
Yeah. So it was a thing to do.
Yeah, and you know, I guess it was, I could do that well. You know, I found it easier to do that than I found it. I struggled with schoolwork. I couldn't do schoolwork well, and I wasn't a sort of sit down and do your homework type person. I was always on the go, always looking for adventure.
Yeah.
You know, from as young as I can remember, always looking for the next adventure, and that still hasn't changed.
Yeah. So you say you were taking the drugs to make yourself fit in. If you
Yeah.
didn't take the drugs, did you feel like you didn't fit in?
Yeah, it's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, what do you do? I think, you know, back then it was, yeah, I don't know what people were doing that.
So you were taking the drugs to fit in with your peers, really, and that crowd that you were hanging out with.
Yeah, and I had a curiosity around it too. Like I was, you know, a little bit drawn to the dark side's a bit cliche, but a little bit drawn to having fun, and you know, that certainly come under the banner of, you know, drugs and alcohol come under the banner of fun, come under the banner of partying. It sort of also come with an identity.
Yeah, and there's an element of danger, which perhaps young
love a little bit of
teens,
danger,
sort of crave.
Yeah.
But it's having an effect on you. You've done 5 apprenticeships. It's difficult to find a job. What about relationships? Was it messing with those as you were growing older into your 20s?
Well, I didn't think so. The people I was in relationships with, I reckon they
had a different point of view.
They probably had a different point of view.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so much about relationships. It probably is definitely it did back then. It didn't, like it was, you know, girlfriends and friends, and you know, just sort of in and out of that sort of stuff all the time. And I think it certainly didn't set a good foundation to have healthy relationships later on.
Did you ever try rehab as a young person?
Never even heard of rehab.
No, not on the radar at all.
No.
Yeah. So how old are you when you decided that perhaps rehab isn't such a bad idea?
Well, firstly, I didn't decide it. I was I think about 33, 34 when you know, I'd been in trouble, you know, from my teens all the way up until I was 34 with the law, and you know, just mixed up and all that stuff, always getting charged with something, and it was actually you know, one of the magistrates referred me into a treatment program back in 2004, and said you've got an opportunity to go to rehab or back to jail, and I chose rehab. And at the time I'd been living under a bridge up in Carrington, and you know, I'd been kicked out of the men's hostels, and I was homeless, and you know, going into rehab seemed like a good idea to get a hot meal and a roof over my head.
Yeah. But it's not like the rehab that we think of when we think of Dooralong.
No, it was it was a residential program. I stayed there for 6 months. It was a different style of rehab than the one out at Dooralong where I'm at now.
Yeah, and were you able to stay clean when you came out?
I stayed in that rehab for 6 months, and then I stayed clean for 5 years.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
That's
it was.
good.
And those 5 years, they'd been the best 5 years of my life up until that date. Yeah.
So even now you can look back and say, when I was free of drugs and alcohol, they are the best years of my life.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
The next question is a bit of a no-brainer. So if they were the best years of your life and you've done it for 5 years, why did you start the drugs and alcohol again?
Yeah, it's like I sort of mentioned in the beginning, Phil, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I guess it's, in those 5 years, I got introduced to 12-step fellowship, where I managed to stay a part of that, and I kept my sobriety through that. And in that 5 years, I went and got re-educated, and I got jobs. All of my dreams that I'd ever dreamt of had come true, and I took that stuff for granted. I moved away from the 12-step fellowship, thinking that I can do this from here on inwards, and
I don't need this anymore. I can do it on my own.
Yeah. And basically, a series of events happened, which are the equivalent of kicking my toe on the gutter, and I picked up again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Gav. Look, we're going to break for some more music, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up Gav's story, because we do know that at some point he found out about Dooralong, where he's been for the past 8.5 months. So the Dooralong Transformation Centre. He was telling us how at another stage in his life he went to a rehab, did the time there, learnt the lessons, came out, was clean for 5 years. But then, I don't know whether we would call it pride or whatever, conceit, but he started to think that he'd licked this. Now he'd cured himself, and that was a bad move, because you fell back into addiction, Gav.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And what time are we talking about? How many years ago is this?
Like 10 years ago.
Right. So quite a long time before you found Dooralong. Yeah. So you went back into addiction, and that brought back all the usual problems, did it?
Yeah. So I was abusing prescription medication that time, and that's what I did for about a year and a half, and still sort of quite functioning. I managed to hold down jobs, but I was abusing pain medication.
Yeah. And you, I think I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, Gav, you also said you went to another rehab at some stage? So
I got clean. I got clean off the prescription medication, and I got back into the 12-step fellowship and didn't go to another rehab, and I managed to get like another 5 years up, or a similar amount of time, and then I've been using for the last few years. Yeah, so I tried a rehab about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and that was I'm in my third rehab now. So I did the first one 2004. The second one was 2 years ago, and that was just a 30-day program.
Yeah.
And then I relapsed a couple of weeks after that.
And then your third is the Dooralong one.
Yeah.
Is, having done two previous ones, is there something different about the program at Dooralong?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think the first and most obvious is the time limit.
In the fact that there isn't one.
Well, there isn't one. There's a suggested sort of time frame, and that's like you can complete the program in about 6 months, and then with another stage added onto that, 9 months, and then they've got housing options after that, and you know, I guess for me, that's the longest at the moment. Dooralong's probably one of the longer term rehabs around our area.
Yeah.
And you know, I had a lot of fear because of the rehab I was in a year and a half ago. It was only a 30-day program, and I was desperate to get it. You know, I was desperate to get back in recovery. And
so, how did you hear about Dooralong?
I've known a lot of mates that have gone there.
Yeah.
And,
word of mouth.
Yeah, word of mouth.
Yeah. So yes, it is longer, much longer than the 30-day second rehab that you did. There's also a spiritual sort of side to what they do down at Dooralong as well. How did that sit with you?
I was real welcoming of it at this time in my life. At other times in my life, I haven't been. And you know, to the point like quite anti having any sort of spiritual element. And you know, I went into the rehab this time, even, you know, while I was in detox. I knew that this time around, for me, I had an idea of what I was looking at around rehab and what was going to be involved. And you know, I know intellectually what's there and available for the program, but you know, the stuff for me was, how do I get vulnerable with my emotions? How do I get vulnerable with, you know, my past and make peace with my past? And how do I do the God stuff? You know, like I know people that, all the people that I've looked up to, all the men in my life and women in my life that I've looked up to that have changed their life, they're learning how to be okay with themselves, and also how to have, you know, how to walk a spiritual path.
Yeah, it's something we've said before when we've been talking to guys. It's just an acknowledgement that we aren't just we're not just a physical and emotional sort of being, we're also a spiritual being as well. And if we neglect to look after that part of our lives, then, you know, it has an impact on the other parts of our life.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So we haven't talked about your family, Gav. Are they supportive of you, or have you lost touch with them?
Look, awesome question. It's in, you know, I guess throughout my life I've been in and out of touch with my extended family, you know, and but my family, I have a wife and I have 4 kids and a little granddaughter. And
how old is she?
She's just turned 1 a month ago. And so I'm supported by my family, and you know, it's been I guess a hard time for them. It's been a real sensitive time in regards to you know, my family. They're quite aware of what addiction is, and they're quite aware of my past, but they haven't actually seen me in active addiction. They haven't seen me under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And in the last 2 years they have. And you know, they'd only heard of the stories of my past, and you know, I guess tales really of you know, the person I used to be. And you know, so for them to experience and see what they did, you know, you know, I guess I've hurt them. You know, there's a lot of trust that's been misplaced there, and you know,
a lot of bridges to rebuild. Yeah,
and you know, I guess a turning point for me was, you know, I believed I'd worked quite hard in the last sort of 10-15 years, and you know, and I'd done the right thing around work, and you know, I was a completely different person than what I used to be in a previous lifetime. And you know, and I sort of I guess the egotistical side of me didn't want to admit that I had a problem, and I couldn't sort of reach out for help, or chose not to reach out for help. So I kept that. It's like living two lives. I'm trying to do the right thing at work. I'm trying to be a provider. I'm trying to engage with my family, and but I resort back to my old ways, which is self-medicating and which leads to addiction, which leads to a whole nother life of dishonesty. And
so when you came to Dooralong, was that with your family's support and approval?
My family's support and approval, so yeah, definitely had their approval, but I just a real sort of a game changer for me was it was nearly about this time a year ago where I was sort of holed up in a motel, and I hadn't been home, and I was using quite heavily, and I was angry at the world and everyone else in it, and in that real sort of victim mentality, and thought everyone was against me, and my whole family organised an intervention, and sort of asked me to come to the park and meet them, and I had a feeling sort of what I was about to walk into, and in my mind back then it was I was going to educate them in,
Yeah, you were going to tell them.
Yeah, I was going to tell them, try walking, a day in my shoes, and I thought I was going to swing them on that, but they took me a couple of months to realise, but that was probably one of it's the bravest thing that I've ever seen. A collective of people do, my family do, which was that loved me from a distance, which was they pretty much told me what you're doing isn't okay, it's not okay. My kids told me that it's not okay what you're doing to.
Hard to hear.
Yeah, not okay what what I'm doing to my wife. It's not okay what I'm doing to myself. And they told me to, don't come home until you can help yourself.
Tough love. It's 22:11 here on 94.9, talking to Gav this morning. We've been discovering a lot about Gav's sort of past history. The last thing we were talking about was, well, the love and support that he felt from his family when they arranged an intervention for him and told him a few hard home truths, which prompted him eventually to find his way to Dooralong. And what have you been doing at Dooralong? We know they have the regular therapeutic programs there, but they have these optional extras, which they call regs. But what sort of optional extras have you been doing down at Dooralong, Gav?
So the regs stand for recovery enhancement groups, and so the first one I did was like an ACE program, and ironic, I forget what ACE stands for, but the actual course was about like improving your brain function and your memory.
Yeah.
Really interesting. It was like a 4-week course.
Yeah.
Just on how drugs and alcohol affect your brains, what parts of our brains we think with, and trying to increase your sort of memory capability, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you've done the mindfulness program there?
Done the mindfulness one. They were sort of 8-week courses, the mindfulness program, and did that twice.
You obviously got a lot out of that then.
The first one, I didn't do the homework. It's just like I was too busy to do the homework, which is why I needed to do the mindfulness course again. And that one's been a real game changer for me, the mindfulness stuff. Just about, I'd had some experience in the past about meditating, and but mindfulness was more so about being in the present moment,
just living in the present,
and that stuff's like really sort of closely related to why I use. And I've always been trying to work out how I can connect back in with my family, and I've been trying to do that for years, and My problems start from adolescence there, but using mindfulness techniques really sort of anchors me into the present moment, and enjoying my family, and hanging out with my kids and hanging out with my wife, and I just have such more of an appreciation for that stuff now.
And you graduated, was it 2.5 weeks time?
2 weeks.
And then what happens to Gav? They don't. I think our listeners know they don't just show you or shove you out to the front gate and say, "See you, Gav, you're on your own now." I think it's a little bit more sophisticated than that, isn't it?
Yeah. So the last 2 months I've been working on my exit program, what that looks like. I've had a lot more time at home over the last couple of months, and I guess not just sort of preparing you for that next step, but really sort of nurturing that exit stage of what does my day look like each day when I leave. The spiritual elements I've learnt since I've been out there and engaged in, how do I keep them going throughout the day? What are my drug and alcohol support networks? For me that's the 12-step fellowship, and building building my connections back there, and
So it's being really proactive, isn't it? It's sort of saying, how am I going to fill my days? What are the days going to look like? What are my trigger points? How am I going to sort of react when I am triggered? It's really sort of looking at it in detail.
I've had a one-on-one out there, like my therapist, who's a case manager. I've worked with her quite intensively, the whole time out there, and I've had the one worker, which has been just, she's been phenomenal, and really got into the crux of why I'm there, and how I live in the world on the outside, and adapt to that, and I'm able to sort of stay in touch with her when I've moved on, which. It's all good and well that your program's finished and you're out of here, and she's helped set up my support network on the outside, and when I say help, she's really empowered me to set up my own support network and work through that. It hasn't been an easy task for me,
but it's going to be worthwhile, isn't it?
100%. I'm without sort of looking too much into the future, I really am looking forward to settling into my newer life.
Yeah, with the support of your family?
Support of my family, so I go back home to my wife. It was our wedding anniversary yesterday.
Happy anniversary.
And, I'm really grateful that I'm still married. I'm really grateful that I've got my kids in my life that are all talking to me. And I'm really grateful that they had the boundaries to put up,
that they cared enough to do that intervention that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And you say you've developed an awareness of your spiritual side of things. How are you going to sort of feed the spiritual side of yourself once you leave? I'm going to feed my spiritual nature by surfing as much as I can, getting into the mountains and around nature. I really connect to God through nature, and I haven't found my church yet. Although my church is the 12-step fellowship. Although I do intend to go to church and keep walking this spiritual path. It's very new to me. And you're going to have to find a surfy church. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. Yeah. Look, Gab, it's been a privilege. You've been so honest and so open with us in talking about these addictions and the other things that have happened in your life. We're so glad that you're coming to the end of the programme, because it is an exciting time. It's slightly apprehensive. And we do pray that God will continue to bless you and look after you and wrap his arms of love around you and keep you on the straight and narrow once you graduate from Dooralong in just 2.5 weeks' time. That's going to be an emotional occasion, isn't it?
Yeah.
That graduation.
Will be.
Yeah. That will be at a chapel night.
In 2 weeks' time. I've got a couple of mates that they're graduating tonight, and it's really cool seeing that stuff happen, and people stick it out. It's not easy staying in rehab and living inside a rehab. However, it's a beautiful place. Beautiful place.
Okay, Gav, we will let you go because we know you've got work to do back at Dooralong. I know you've got work to do back at Dooralong because I know you work in the kitchens there. But you were telling me you've done it all already before you came this morning.
Wrapped up 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. All done.
Right.
Yeah.
So no more kitchen work for you today.
No.
All done.
Beautiful.
You've been listening to an encore presentation of the Dooralong stories, which can be heard live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. and repeated 8 p.m. Sunday and 1 a.m. Wednesday, right here on 94.9 rema.cc.